like to introduce Henk, who's been quite a very important part in my life, and in terms of my work environment, in terms of getting into certain spaces that certainly gives me hope and courage in both our country and this world is where we're going. So Henk is my board of director at Bread in Africa. And not only is he a board of director at Bread in Africa, I think he plays an incredible role in all of us as members, as young, youthful members in the board of directors, in giving us guidance in that space and in philanthropic spaces. And Henk is also runs a very incredible organization, the Leadership organization, that helps a lot of entrepreneurs around the country. When I was looking at asking him to come and give a talk, I felt like I was bringing a hammer to come and kill a fly. So Henk is a very experienced leader, and he trains a lot of leaders around the country. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Henk, and I'd like to thank him very much for spending time with us this morning. Not just me, but of course with all the other entrepreneurs. So you get to see a little bit of light of what Henk is all about. There we go, Henk. Welcome.
Lovely. Wonderful. Fantastic. What a lovely introduction. Thank you, Godfrey. I wasn't sure who you were talking about.
Yeah. Very humble as well. That's it.
Right. I'm just going to share screen. And just to confirm, is that clear to everybody? Great. Lovely. So Godfrey, wonderful introduction. Thank you for that. It's really wonderful to be here, and just listening to the proceedings so far. It's a very humbling experience, and it's very nice to see the great work that's unfolding. And I think, as Nicholas alluded earlier, in the events that have unfolded, when you see and hear these type of stories that is being shared, it just highlights that this is really leadership in action. And my passionate belief is that this is really where it's going to guide us in terms of going forwards. So I'm honored to be a very small part of 67 Squared and today, and the great work that's being done. At the Leadership Consortium, we are proud partners of an American company, and we try and borrow from the best in the world. And that's a group called the Zenger-Folkman Group. And we are powered by a concept called the GC Index, and you'll see quite a bit of that in the next 15, 20 minutes we are together. So today I'd like to share some insights with you. The world of leadership and extraordinary leadership is really a vast domain. So my experience has been, if we can just touch on a couple of key insights, that's, I would hope, would add some value to the folks in the forum, and take it from there. So I'd like to kick off with a little video, and let's see how we can really take things forward. It's a pleasure to be associated with somebody like Nelson Mandela. A key theme today is changing the game and how we can be game changers. And we can look to no other better person than Nelson in terms of saying, how did he change the game, and what do we get out of that in terms of going forward? So that's a very nice brief introduction, and hopefully sets the scene in terms of some of the key concepts and things we'll talk about today. Nicholas alluded earlier to this concept of where we find ourselves this week, this year, these last 2 years, and there's only one word that has really come to life if you think about what's unfolding around us as entrepreneurs, as people, as businessmen, as people with a positive intent to take South Africa into new places. And this word called VUCA that is bandaged around quite a lot. The acronym is something to describe volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, and it really is. It's a reality that we look at on the screen now and we say, right. But I think the real challenge to us all is to say that as difficult as it is, the more successful we will be is dependent on how we see this as being the new normal. This is the way it's going to be. The nature and the shape and the size and the dimensions are going to change, but this is really the new normality. And as a guideline in terms of going forward, to try and believe that we can get back to what we call normality is really a false hope and belief. And the more we come to accept it, embrace it, we're going to move into fantastic places. So let's just talk about this thing called leadership. And I loved the word that Nicholas coined and talked about, surthriving. Surthriving is just a wonderful word, and well done to you, Nicholas, to rediscover it. It's fantastic. Our core belief is that leadership is the most important part in terms of surthriving. And if you have to say, well, what do we mean by this thing of leadership? How would we put some words to it? And there's millions of descriptions if you go and check on the internet. Our simplest way is saying creating the conditions for individuals, ourselves, entrepreneurs, teams, and organizations to succeed and thrive. And that really cuts to the bottom line of what we're talking about. So one of the key things that is central to the work we do, and I would like to just share that and hope that this becomes part of your future as you guys go forward, is this concept that leadership is really about understanding that it is the most important thing in your business. And everything that you're going to do that's going to make you more successful, that's going to take you to new heights, is this concept of being able to lead effectively. And there's a very simple graph that we use, and it's the only graph we always refer to, which says that if you can improve your leadership effectiveness, your organization will thrive. It's as simple as that. That's how it goes. That's the bottom line. And here's an example from, it's an American example, but it's to demonstrate the difference between what we call poor leadership, good leadership, and great leadership. And this is something in action. It's a real life example. It's a banking group, and an extensive study was done. And if you have a look and equate leadership to bottom line profit, leadership is not just a nice to have or something you put at the top of the cake once you have a cake. It really is an integral part of getting to become what is going to be. So if we compare, in this example, we compared people who are poor leaders on the left-hand side, and the net result is that those folks will lose money for the organization. You will not make money. And money is the start of moving your organization into achieving better and stronger ESG goals. So in the middle of this sector, where most leaders are, 80% of us, we tend to believe we're okay leaders, we're good, we'll make some money, and it'll be fine. But I think the real challenge and the mantra we use in encouraging the way to go forward in extraordinary leadership is this concept of great leaders. And the attraction here is the fact that they will double the profit for an organization. So by moving into that space, you can do nothing else to your business. If you just take that leap and you can develop in that space, you will be able to double your profits. And when we talk double profits, we're talking about extraordinary leaders who generate much greater income. And in here, it's possibly at least double. And when we talk great leaders, we are talking about being in the top 10%. So extraordinary, our world, when you put facts and figures and numbers to it, is really about being in the top 10% of where you are. And that's really the important part here. So something we get asked, and when we start talking about extraordinary leadership, people say, but to be extraordinary, do I have to be perfect? And this is an insight that we have learned and gained from our colleagues in the States, the Zenger Folkman guys. And they've done a lot of research, and that research anchors itself on the fact that we don't have to be perfect to be an extraordinary leader. We have to understand our strengths, and we have to really get in touch with those And if we leverage those strengths, and we know from our research, if you can lever at least 2 to 3 of your strengths, you will be pretty close to becoming that extraordinary leader. And the understanding of it, the insight as to what makes it tick, that is really where the success is going to lie going forward. A further insight that we have central to our understanding of how do we become extraordinary is this concept that good does not equal great. And we saw that in the example with the banking group. We need to be great. And this is a challenge I think we have specifically in South Africa. But there is, unfortunately, in a lot of the folks that we deal with, even our day-to-day dealings, I think we have a challenge of mediocrity, and we have a challenge of accepting it's good enough. And for those of us who want to move into the extraordinary leadership space, there is a real invitation to say, let's banish mediocrity. We cannot have mediocrity. Whether it's the simple way in which a person serves you in your local shop, whether it is doing business with colleagues, when it's receiving service from service providers ourselves, or when we are giving it to our potential market and our customers. This is really a key element that I would ask to underline things we do, stretching what is unfortunately becoming so accepted as being normal. And I'm a bit like Nicholas, I have got a bit of a silver beard here. And I really see this in practice in that I see poor service these days is not actually linked to even the simplest little apology for poor service. And I think this is wrong. And I think it's really creates this culture that mediocrity is fine. And I would invite us as a group to say, the more we can challenge mediocrity, we will be part of making things dramatically better, not only for ourselves, but all around us. So let's have a look at this thing about impact. And extraordinary leaders make an impact in the organizations, in the communities, and in the broader world. And everything that you guys are doing at 67 Squared is just magnificent in terms of creating an impact, helping create impact in the broader organization. So how do we actually create this impact, and how do we become, like Nelson Mandela, a real game changer? And it's not something that is impossible, it is all within our realm. And that, I think, is the core message that I would like to share. Every single one of us can make an impact. So the type of work that this is based on is done on some studies in the UK in the last probably 5 to 10 years. It's done with entrepreneurial companies. It's done with companies in the tech industry specifically. But the tech industry is interesting because it has smashed all the previous concepts about how we actually make an impact in the business world. So there are some lessons we got out of this research that I'd like to share with you and hopefully become part of what we can use going forwards. So there's some very interesting insights in terms of what are the things that allow us to make impact, that allow us to move to becoming extraordinary leaders. So the first one is, and it was a new insight that came out from this research, was the thing that really ignites and is the foundation of impact is imagination. And I'm sure for Nicholas and your team and the guys in the creative world, this is just natural. But for folks in the day-to-day making business and driving cash flows, imagination is something quite unique. So this is a key driver in terms of saying, how do we liberate imagination? How do we create it? How do we articulate it? And what they found was there's a group of people who are really being able to articulate a vision, have big picture ideas, have strategic capabilities, and continually have this creative and imagination idea generation that just flows around their heads all the time. And it's just wonderful to see these sort of people. But this is a core ingredient that is really part of where we see impact coming from. The second key insight was this concept of obsession. Now, in the leadership world and in the impact world in the past, we've never seen this type of concept. So obsession came through as being a new insight, a new concept. And just listening to the wonderful three folks you had this morning on Bontle, Milan, and Songi, I mean, I could just see this obsession coming through loud and clear. It's a key ingredient. It's wonderful to see. So it's an obsession to turn idea into reality. It's ambitious. I think it came through loud and clear, a drive to succeed, and all the challenges that we have were outlined so well by the three. A compulsion to share ideas, that it's not just me inside and to get it out and to do it and make it happen. And part of this is an intense vigor that is there all the time. It's this unbelievable chase, and do, in terms of driving themselves, but also driving people around them. And I was just so impressed. And I saw that coming through. If you look at the wonderful three ladies before us who were it's just wonderful to see. So I think Bontley also mentioned this appetite for risk-taking. Taking that flight down to Cape Town it's an appetite for risk. It's something that you say to somebody afterwards, why did you do it? Well, I don't know. It just was a great idea. I did it. It worked. And it's wonderful to see. But it's a core ingredient. It's a core ingredient of making things work. Some of the other insights that came through, but more of the old-fashioned styles of what and how do we make impact, is this one of action. And there's no way, and all three, I'm sure the ladies who spoke this morning will get away from this fact that there was an enormous amount of things that had to happen. And this brings us back to that mantra that was espoused by Malcolm Gladwell, which said that nothing happens with at least 10,000 hours of hard work and grind. And every single one of us knows that nothing pops out of the sky magically and sits in front of us, and all of a sudden we have this wonderful business that's unfolding. It's anchored in action and getting things done. And I think in South Africa, one of the key things that highlights what South Africans have, and it's well accepted and approved and loved by people around the world, is that South Africans have an unbelievable ability to be pragmatic about things. And it's another way of describing this. It's a very, very healthy dose of pragmatism or common sense. Common sense is a way in which one can transcribe this into something that is very real. And living in South Africa, dealing with the type of challenges we deal with is unbelievable. We tend to under-realize how flexible, how pragmatic, how commonsensical we are when we deal with folks in other countries. And I've got people I work with in Australia, for instance. It's a highly regulated society. And when you speak to colleagues and friends there and tell them what life is like running a business, they just cannot believe that these are the things that we deal with. It's unseen, it's unspoken of, and it's not something that people have lived through. It's in our blood as South Africans. We have this. It's part of what we are. So that allows us to take those ideas and the concepts and the themes which are in the impact matrix and put together a framework, which we call the impact framework. And the impact framework pulls together these ideas, and it was embodied in that lovely video I showed you in the beginning. So what the research highlighted was, if you want to look at what are the key things that allow us to make impact, there's a couple of key themes that come through here. So firstly, what we see is that there's a group of people we identified called game changers. Game changers transform the future. They create original ideas. We spoke about the whole concept of obsession and imagination. Then you have a group of people, and we have a set of skills which are related to people that make sense of these ideas. We call those strategists. And then we have a group of people who do a great. Their strengths lie in implementing and making things happen. And then there's a new concept or a thought that was not there before, linked to the obsession thing, which spoke about the fact that there is a group of people we call polishers. And polishers are people that create a future to be proud of. And they make ideas and concepts brilliant. And probably espoused and epitomized by Mandela was the concept in the fifth group here of skills that make impact and energy is playmakers. And playmakers orchestrate the future. They bring everything together in very unique and different ways to make things happen. And when you look at this framework, it helps to understand what are the inners and what are the workings in terms of us being able to add impact, and how do we become extraordinary, and how do we move into that space as individuals. So let's look at this in a bit. I've called this the X-ray model, the X-ray profile of the model. We talk about a word, fancy word called proclivities, which is energy zones. So this model and impact says, where do our natural energies flow as people? Where do we naturally find that we want to do things, and where are we naturally great at doing things? So we talk about the game changers here being a combination of imagination or obsession. They tend to be idea focused. We talk about the strategist having imaginative elements as part of their matrix, but also very pragmatic. And then the implementers, pragmatism and action is what drives those folks and those skill sets that people have. And these folks, as we said, they build the future. And then we have a group of polishers who create a future to be proud of, but they have this obsessive and they focus on action. And as we mentioned, the playmakers really are integrators, and they play a key role in pulling ideas, processes, thoughts together in such a way that they allow the integration of the future. So that's a framework. We call this the impact framework. It's a base in terms of allowing us to become extraordinary. And if this was in a live forum, I can hear most of you saying, all right, blah, blah, this is a lot of stuff and a lot of theory. We're in the practical world. Is this real? Does it work? Does it happen? And I've got the real pleasure of sharing a real life profile of someone who has played a massive and pivotal role in us all being here today. So I have the privilege of having Godfrey on our BLA board of directors. He's a major source of value, insight, and is constantly challenging us to new ways of doing things. But I thought, and Godfrey was happy that we took his profile, and we were able to. I'm going to share what his profile looks like. But if you can see that here is somebody in your midst who is part of you, and to understand this is a little bit of an insight when we measure and we can assess what makes Godfrey tick and how does this relate to the impact concept and how does this help us become extraordinary. I thought I would just share this, and Godfrey kindly said he's happy. So we call this what we call a bubble chart, and the bubble chart just says, what is your profile like? So here's Godfrey's bubble chart on the left. So you can see that Godfrey, we tend to have two strength areas or energy zones where we really, really are at our best. So these are our strength zones. So Godfrey is what we call a game changer and a polisher. Those are his two profiles in his bubble chart. And that will be characterized by what you see. So Godfrey is continually seeing opportunities in the outside world. One of our challenges is to continually say to Godfrey, let's focus a bit. Let's just try and understand a little bit of what this could be. Help us understand what's in that lovely head of yours. So it's a typical example of a wonderful game changer. Godfrey's all over the place all the time with multitude of projects. I've never seen somebody with so many things on his plate. I spoke to Godfrey last Friday at maybe 5:30. So most of us are that time thinking about maybe a bit of supper, maybe something to drink. Godfrey said, I got 4 hours ahead of me on a Friday night, still on his plate. So this is typical. He's passionate, obsessive. Godfrey I love you'll always see that Godfrey's brimming with excitement, and it just comes out in his nature. He's fanatical in his precision as well, which is part of the polisher concept. That comes through loud and clear. And I'll give you a simple example. I'm sure Godfrey won't mind. He shared with me once that polishers tend to be quite fanatical attention to detail. And Godfrey mentioned that if you had to look in his cupboard, he is unbelievably precise in how his cupboard has to be packed and how it has to be sequenced and stacked by color, by size. And this is a beautiful indicator of a polisher who's really in action. And Godfrey's in your midst. And here's a living example of how this impact is visible, it's there, it's part of. So my challenge today to you is to really try and hope that there are some concepts here that have hopefully guided and given you some pillars in which we can start working on saying, how do we create impact? How do we become extraordinary leaders? How do we banish this mediocrity thing that we do tend to have around us? And how do we move on? And how do we become extraordinary leaders for more impact? So to wrap up, I'm just going to share the video again. It summarizes very well what we've covered, and I think it's a nice way to put it together. So from my side, a big thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Godfrey, for letting me share some of your wonderful profile and X-ray chart here. I wish you guys extremely well in your future path together. It's exciting, and your stories are really invigorating and real good examples and beacons of more hope in the week we've just come through. So a big thank you for everybody.